Multicultural Education by Wendy Skrabarczyk. What is multicultural education? Multicultural education is the process of comprehensive school reform and basic education for all students. It challenges and rejects racism and other forms of discrimination in schools and society. Pretty much, it's where students are not going to be judged or ridiculed for the way they look, their religion, their gender, their beliefs, and those sorts of things inside a teaching environment. What is the role that culture plays in education? Culture plays a very big role in education because most classroom settings are set up and kind of taught in a way for the white middle class. Their rules and regulations would be the same way as a white kids, who live in a middle class home, pretty much have the same rules and regulations that modern teachers and classrooms use. But obviously, not everyone is white and in the middle class. So, when it comes to culture, teachers have to know that there's going to be diversity and not all students are going to understand the way rules and regulations are set up because at home, that's not how it is for them. A pretty good representation of the difference in cultural representation is Banks' Dimensions of Multicultural Education, where it talks about knowledge construction, prejudice reduction, empowering school culture, equality, and content integration. And it's pretty much the basis of how to successfully have a culturally diverse school and how to integrate culture into the school because first off, teachers need to help students understand what they're teaching, and sometimes the best way to do that is to by integrate their culture. For example, in the book, it talked about one teacher using rap lyrics to kind of break down a certain type of literature. And this was done in an African American community where rap is highly influenced, and most of the children and kids listen to it. So they can kind of understand um, what was going on in the English class better than a teacher just, trying to break it down and how the book did it. Another thing is prejudice reduction to try and have the students understand that they are all different and that should be celebrated, and that other teaching methods besides one specific method should be used, and also empowering school culture, which would be having the staff get involved in trying to break down ethnic and racial lines, and maybe just having, like a time in the classroom where, everyone gets to talk about how race or, culture has, changed their life. Um, and then equality, it's that every student, regardless of, race, gender, or social class, should get the same exact chances and have the same exact opportunities. Supporting theories. Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of comes into play here because in that it talks about how the most basic needs need to be met first in order for um, children and teens to be able to, get self assurance. So if needs aren't being met at home, like, safe place to stay, or, there's food scarcity, things like that, then the child doesn't have the needs to kind of progress as a normal white middle class child would. And so that needs to be taken into consideration in the classroom because it's harder for certain students to learn if they aren't self-aware and self-confident like the less culturally diverse. And then Yuri Braunbender talks about the exosystem and how that affects younger children and teens by their surroundings. What they see as normal would be like what their home life is like, and what their community is like. And so obviously for different cultures, that's going to provide different home lives, and so different students will have different views as to what is normal and what isn't normal, and that can cause potentially problems in a classroom if the teacher isn't aware of what normalcy is for the students. And then in Erik Erikson's theory, I've kind of focused more on the adolescent theory, the identity versus role, and that's where the somewhat older students are trying to learn who they are and their role in their environment, and like kind of the previous one, depending on your environment is going to depend on who you see yourself as, and the teachers need to be aware in whatever environment they're in what they need to cater to. For example, if you're dealing with, let's say, a young Hispanic woman, she's probably going to have a very heightened sense of family and want to have like a tight knit group of friends, and she's going to have traditions that her culture, brings to the table, like quinceañeras and things like that. Whereas if you're dealing with a young white male, he probably, is reluctant to listen to his parents and wants to hang out with his friends, and kind of is probably not listening to authority. So those are kind of two examples of two students that you could have in the same classroom and how you need to cater to their different needs due to the difference in cultural backgrounds. Okay, a different style of teaching. Like I was kind of talking about earlier, you need to understand your students. You need to understand where they're coming from, and maybe the reason why they're slacking off or acting out has nothing to do with the curriculum. It may just have to do with their surroundings or what's going on at home, or maybe they're hungry, or you just have to be aware of other outside factors that aren't necessarily in the classroom. So I would recommend getting involved with your students and their family. Maybe have, parent-teacher conferences once a month, and try and, gauge, whether they show up with their parents or not, or if their parents can make it, how much their parents, value their children's education. And you can kind of gauge on, maybe that's why certain students aren't succeeding where others are. And also, just also being involved in the community yourself as a teacher. You can go, to the grocery store, and maybe you'll run into someone's parents and just have a nice, conversation about how they're doing in school. It can help to, motivate the students to do better. And also, community involvement has been shown to be very helpful when successful alumni from multicultural schools come back, and it shows the students that they do have a chance. It is worth trying to improve themselves. And also social understanding, because most of the time, whatever cultural background the teacher comes from or whatever race they are, it may not be the same as their students. So they just need to understand that their students may have different views and different lifestyles and different ways of doing things. In the book, it talked about how there was this teacher, and they were in a Hawaiian area with Hawaiian culture, and how at home the student would, they'd have stories and family time, and the student would interrupt whoever was talking to, interject their story, and at home that's fine, but apparently the student was doing that in the classroom, and that is not okay. So the teacher didn't know, why that was going on, but that's just because that's how the student was brought up. So it's just helpful to understand why students are doing what they're doing and just to be socially understanding. Talk about it. Obviously, racism and cultural differences um, are, not exactly the easiest topics to talk about, but if if you can try and have a positive conversation in, each classroom you teach about it, it can help you see what your students are going through, and then maybe they can see how it's challenging for you to deal with each different cultural aspect that is being thrown at you. Also, respect your students. You need to respect what they're going through. They may be young, they may be older, but everyone obviously has a journey, and culture plays a big part in that. So just be mindful and respectful. Different cultural backgrounds bring up different issues. Obviously, the teacher will only be able to really understand their cultural background, but that doesn't mean that they can't have empathy towards, different cultures and different backgrounds. So it's just good to remain mindful of that in a classroom setting. Real classroom examples: give students verbal material instead of reading material. Not every student is going to be a strong reader depending on their background. Maybe they've been moved from school to school to school. Maybe they weren't exactly given the best teachings when they were younger, so maybe they're not the best at reading. So maybe giving them verbal material, like, going on to YouTube and learning about, certain aspects in the class, can be more helpful than them reading 10 pages out of a book. Tell students how to get their teacher's attention. I believe it's helpful if the teacher makes it very clear how to get their attention. Like, tell the class, raise your hand, if you want to talk to me. Don't just yell out in the middle of my lecture. I think it's clear to, make boundaries in the classroom, because different students will have different ways to get your attention. But if you make it clear that in that classroom there's one way to get your attention correctly, the students will most likely follow that in the classroom. Ask students how they feel when you correct them. Obviously, students are not right all the time, and so you will have to correct them, but you should also take into consideration how that makes them feel. You never want to make a student feel, you know, not intelligent or unwelcome, so you still need to try and make it a positive learning environment, but at the same time they do need to be corrected. So ask them how that made them feel. Use real life examples. Use examples that they can relate to, within their community, within their life, within, the time period in which they're in. And also discuss prejudice and, how that makes them feel. Try and have a respectful and progressive discussion about it. I also wanted to add real life positive teaching examples. These are three teachers who were up for the Teacher of the Year award in a global manner, and they I liked these three because they seemed all very diverse. None of them were within the United States, and they all had very interesting quotes, and they all seemed to want to inspire students, and they all come from different cultural backgrounds themselves, but they're still teaching students in a positive way. In conclusion, culture plays a huge role in education. It should not be downplayed, it should not be overlooked. Teachers should try and understand what their students are going through. We should talk about it and be open to other opinions. Obviously, like I've said earlier, there's going to be different cultures within the same classroom, so you're going to try and open everyone's eyes to what everyone's going through at the time. Encourage diversity in the classroom. Every student is not the same, so every student should not be treated the same. And I believe it's important to um, show students their good qualities and try and focus on those and how they're different and what they can bring to the table.